How was it? Stories about famous people who changed the world. He created a world where dreams came alive, but his own life began far from any fairy tale. Walt Disney was born in 1901 in a small house in Chicago, Illinois. He was the fourth son of Elias and Flora Disney, a hard-working but struggling family. His father was strict, often cold, a man of routine and discipline. His mother was gentle, the soft voice in a world that often seemed harsh. When Walt was a boy, his family moved to a small farm in Marceline, Missouri, a quiet town surrounded by endless fields and slow summer skies. It was here, among apple trees, red barns, and steam trains, that Walt discovered imagination. He loved to draw. He sketched everything: animals, trains, neighbors, even the family cat. His first audience was the local doctor, who once paid him with a few coins for a drawing of his horse. For Walt, that moment was magic, the realization that his art could create happiness, that his imagination had value. But life wasn't easy. The family's farm failed, and the Disneys moved again, this time to Kansas City, where young Walt delivered newspapers with his brother Roy before sunrise every morning. Winters were freezing. The streets were dark. But Walt never stopped dreaming. He said later, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." After school, he worked small jobs, drawing wherever he could, advertisements, catalogs, even street signs. He took night classes in art, trying to turn passion into purpose. At 16, he wanted to join the Army during World War I, but he was too young. So he joined the Red Cross, driving an ambulance in France. His ambulance wasn't painted in camouflage. Walt covered it with cartoons and sketches. Even in the middle of destruction, he brought color to the gray. When he returned home, America was changing, and so was he. Walt knew he didn't want an ordinary life. He wanted to tell stories, to make people feel what he had felt as a boy in Marceline: wonder, innocence, joy. He moved to Kansas City, where he opened his first little studio, Laugh-O-Gram Films. There, with a small group of friends and dreamers, he created short animated films based on fairy tales. But they were ahead of their time, charming, creative, but not profitable. In 1923, Laugh-O-Gram went bankrupt. Walt was broke, sleeping in his office, eating beans from a can. Most people would have given up, but not Walt. He packed his suitcase, borrowed $40, and boarded a train to Hollywood. He was 21, no money, no studio, no team, but he had a dream, and a sketchbook full of characters waiting to be born. As the train rolled west, Walt looked out the window and whispered to himself, "I'm going to make something that will make people happy." And he did, because the young man from Marceline, the paperboy who drew on scraps and lived on hope, was about to change the world. Hollywood, 1923. A young man steps off a train with $40 in his pocket, a suitcase full of sketches, and a dream too big to measure. His name, Walt Disney. Hollywood was already filled with dreamers, actors, directors, producers, all chasing fame and fortune. But Walt wasn't interested in fame. He wanted something bigger, to build worlds, to make people believe in magic again. He started small. In his uncle's garage, with his brother that Roy tore by his side, Walt opened the Disney Brothers Studio. It wasn't much: a camera, a few pencils, and endless imagination. Their first real hit came with a character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, produced for Universal Studios. The audience loved Oswald. He was charming, mischievous, and full of life. Walt finally saw a glimpse of success. But that success came with a cruel lesson. When Walt went to New York to renegotiate his contract, he discovered the unthinkable. Universal owned Oswald, not him. Worse, his own animators had been hired away by the studio behind his back. He had lost everything: the rights, the team, the future. Walt boarded the train back to California with Roy, silent and broken. For most people, that would have been the end. But on that long ride west, something extraordinary happened. He started to draw. A little mouse, round ears, friendly eyes, a spark of mischief and hope. That mouse would soon have a name: Mickey. Mickey Mouse was born not in a studio, but in defeat, in the ashes of betrayal. Walt said later, "I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse." The first Mickey short, Steamboat Willie, premiered in 1928. It was one of the first cartoons with synchronized sound, something no one had done before. The moment Mickey whistled his tune, audiences fell in love. Mickey wasn't just a cartoon. He was joy, optimism, and resilience. Everything Walt himself stood for. In a world recovering from war and heading toward the Great Depression, Mickey gave people something to smile about. He became a symbol of hope. But Walt wasn't satisfied. He pushed animation further, experimenting with color, storytelling, and sound. When people said animation could never be taken seriously, Walt smiled and said, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." And he did. Walt and his team created short after short: Silly Symphonies, The Skeleton Dance, Flowers and Trees. Each one was more beautiful, more detailed, more ambitious than the last. But ambition has a price. Walt worked tirelessly, often skipping meals and sleeping in the studio. His perfectionism drove his animators crazy, but it also pushed them to greatness. By the mid-1930s, Walt wanted to take the next impossible step, to make the world's first full-length animated feature film. People called it Disney's folly. They said no one would sit through a 90-minute cartoon, but Walt believed. He mortgaged everything, risked his company, and poured his soul into it. That film was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When it premiered in 1937, the audience cried, laughed, and cheered. The moment the lights came up, they stood and applauded for minutes. Walt wept. He had proven them all wrong. Snow White became a global phenomenon, the first step in building an empire of imagination. But Walt Disney's journey was only beginning. Behind the smiles and applause, new challenges waited: war, stress, betrayal, and the impossible dream of creating a world that only existed in his imagination. The success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs had changed everything. Walt Disney was no longer just an animator. He was a legend. But with success came pressure, expectations, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. The 1940s brought new challenges. The world was at war, and the Disney studio, now a thriving creative machine, was under strain. Walt wanted to keep making art, but the world demanded propaganda and patriotism. He cooperated with the U.S. government to produce training and morale films like Der Führer's Face and Education for Death. Cartoons that fought fascism with satire. But inside the studio, things weren't so cheerful. Animators went on strike, demanding better pay and recognition. Walt felt betrayed. To him, the studio was a family, his dream. To them, it was just a job. The strike broke his heart. He turned inward. He began to dream again, not of films, but of a place, a world where families could laugh, play, and feel the joy of childhood again. Walt called it the happiest place on earth. But before Disneyland, there were dark years. The war drained resources, projects failed, and Walt faced severe stress and insomnia. Yet he found solace in storytelling, producing Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi. Each was a masterpiece, stunning, emotional, and ahead of its time, but not always profitable. Still, Walt never measured success in money. He said, "I don't make pictures just to make money. I make money to make more pictures." By the 1950s, television was changing everything. While Hollywood resisted, Walt embraced it. He saw it not as competition, but as connection, a way to bring his magic into every home in America. He launched the Mickey Mouse Club and Disneyland TV, introducing himself to millions of families. Walt became not just a name, but a friendly face. Uncle Walt? But his greatest creation was still just an idea, a theme park, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Walt traveled with his daughters to small amusement parks across America and found them dirty, noisy, lifeless. He thought, there has to be something better. And so he began to plan Disneyland, a place of wonder, imagination, and joy. He mortgaged everything once again, sold his own house, and convinced sponsors to invest in a dream that most thought impossible. Construction began in Anaheim, California in 1954. It was chaos, deadlines, money problems, and sleepless nights. Walt was everywhere, checking paint colors, riding the trains, sketching, giving orders. His perfectionism drove the builders mad. He wanted everything perfect because this was not just a park, it was his life's dream. On July 17, 1955, Disneyland opened its gates. Thousands poured in, the rides broke down, the asphalt melted in the heat, and chaos reigned. Walt called it Black Sunday. But then something happened. The next day, families came back, children laughed, the castle sparkled, the magic worked. Walt stood in the crowd, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "It's alive." Disneyland wasn't just a park, it was a world reborn. It captured what Walt had always believed, that imagination could build bridges between generations, and that hope could be real. His empire grew. Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, Cinderella, Mary Poppins. Each film carried his signature, heart, humor, and wonder. But success came at a cost. Walt's health began to fail. The long hours, the pressure, and the perfectionism began to wear him down. He smoked constantly, worried endlessly, and rarely rested. Still, he never stopped dreaming. He began planning Walt Disney World in Florida, a place even bigger, cleaner, and grander than Disneyland. He called it the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, EPCOT. It would combine innovation, technology, and humanity, his ultimate vision for the future. But time was running out. By the early 1960s, Walt Disney was no longer just a filmmaker or businessman. He was a symbol of hope, imagination, and childhood itself. He had built an empire of joy, but behind the smiles, Walt was growing tired. He had been working without pause for more than 4 decades, from sketching in barns to building castles out of steel and dreams. His energy was unmatched, but his body was beginning to fail him. Still, he refused to slow down. In 1961, Mary Poppins entered production, a project he had chased for 20 years. He believed that this story about magic in ordinary life perfectly captured what Disney stood for. It wasn't just a film, it was a message. Anything can happen if you let it. Mary Poppins became one of his greatest triumphs, winning 5 Academy Awards and reminding the world that Walt still had magic left in him. But even as the applause echoed, Walt's thoughts were somewhere else. In Florida, where a secret project was taking shape. He dreamed of building out a city of the future, a place where innovation and community could coexist. Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It was to be his grandest creation, not a fantasy, but a real city, powered by progress and hope. Walt drew maps, recorded plans, and talked endlessly about the future. His team sometimes couldn't keep up with his pace. They said he was impossible. But Walt smiled and said, "If you can dream it, you can do it." Then in 1966 came the diagnosis, lung cancer. He had smoked all his life, and now his body was failing him. Still, he kept working, sketching Epcot plans from his hospital bed. He even asked for a map of Florida to be pinned to the ceiling above him so he could keep looking at the land where his dream would rise. On December 15th, 1966, Walt Disney passed away. He was 65. The world mourned. Children cried. Adults who had once laughed at Mickey and marveled at Disneyland felt as though they had lost a piece of their own youth. His brother, Roy, who had stood beside him through every triumph and heartbreak, made a silent promise to finish Walt's final dream. And he did. In 1971, Walt Disney World opened in Orlando, Florida, 6 years after Walt's death. On opening day, someone said, "It's a shame Walt didn't live to see this." Roy smiled and replied, "He saw it first." Walt Disney's story didn't end with his death. It began again. Every time a child sees a castle light up, every time a family laughs together in a movie theater, every time a dream feels just a little bit closer. He once said, "Laughter is timeless. Imagination has no age. Dreams are forever." And that's the truth of Walt Disney's life. Not a perfect man, but a man who believed in something perfect, that even in a world of cynicism and struggle, wonder still matters. He gave the world more than films, parks, and characters. He gave it hope. And long after the man was gone, the dreamer remained in every sparkle, every song, every story that begins with just 5 words. Once upon a time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.